Okay, we've been given the high sign, so it's time to start. Appreciate everybody coming in today. As you can see from the exciting topic, migrating document. He looks at me and says, yeah, okay. So, you know, what we're going to step through, okay, or what Dave is primarily going to step through is he's going to tell you about first Marblehead and really go through. I will tell you that both of us, I can safely speak for Dave, and he'll introduce himself, we like to talk about the subject. We've lived this whole thing. So while we are presenting or David's talking, feel free to ask the questions. We don't have to wait till 5 minutes left, and then you can ask all these questions, and we hopefully remember the topic you're referring to when we started that piece, all right? So it's not exactly 10,000 people in this room, so, you know, as we're going through, feel free to ask, you know, ask any questions you want, except for anybody that works for me or the guy I work for. So other than that, everybody feel free to ask questions. So David, why don't you come and introduce yourself?
Okay, hopefully you can hear me all right. And thank you, Adam, for that. Splendid intro. And I'll just echo the same thing. I do really want this to be as interactive as possible. It's certainly my style. I know it's Adam's style as well. And the reason why I'm standing here, as much as I love talking, I could talk anywhere. I really want to make sure that you came here for a reason and you get that reason accomplished. I'm happy to sway a little bit from our agenda. That's really not a problem. I can talk slow, I can talk fast, we can cover whatever we need to. I can, true. But at any rate, you know, our purpose today really is to talk very briefly about the company and what we do, just to give you enough context to understand. Like Adam said, we really did do this. And as you'll see in the middle of it, and for anyone who was in the last session with us, it's not all good news. It ends well, but there was some pain along the way. So as I go through, first Marblehead is the company I work at. Again, my name is David White. I'm the Managing Director of Systems Architecture and Development at First Marblehead, which puts me in charge of half of IT. So the infrastructure side is not me. Everything else pretty much is. So business problems and whatnot all roll up to my area. First Marblehead is a company, we were founded in 1991. It was really originally done so all aspects of student loan processing, from marketing to funding, are what First Marblehead focused on. Since then, we've expanded, and it's more appropriate now for me to say education and finance, due to a couple of last couple of years, acquisitions. We've entered the student loan market for credit unions. So historically, we always partner with large banks. Now we are the largest credit union provider of student loans, and as well as our subsidiary tuition management systems, which really focuses on payment plan processing and evolving into just straight payment processing, which is quite similar to a loan, but has its own unique document management needs. And they're going to be folded into Alfresco as well. But today really is not about our company or about all the future until the end of the slide. It's really about our path from when we started on Documentum to ending up successfully on Alfresco 4 as we go forward. So, like I said, we are all about processing student loan documentation, or at least this was our initial use case. And these loan documents arrive via a few different channels, whether it be mail or fax, or most recently in our fastest growing channel is self-service document upload, because that's just sort of the way everyone likes to do things these days. What happens when we get one of these, if it's a paper image or a fax, it's ingested by Kofax, and then it's going to be inserted automatically into Alfresco, and then profiled by a loan indexing team whose real purpose is to look up the loan based on the data on the form and make the binding of the document to the loan or person on the loan that it's applicable to. And that's going to begin the operations lifecycle of these documents. So this is our core use case, is ingestion of these documents for final review, ultimately towards the goal of funding a loan. The other piece of this one is that we've got a centralized loan folder where all internally generated documents are inserted in Alfresco to be visible by all loan operations. So a document on its way out to a person will be generated and stored as an electronic image. We use PDF. And the documents that come back in to trigger the lifecycle events on the loan are also stored in Alfresco. So really that's our core function here. Of course, there are always exceptions to this process, so we've got several different spaces inside Alfresco for review needs, archive needs, whatever. But our core flow is going to be to ingest these things real time. When we first started, we were faced with a problem where we had an existing imaging system that is EMC Documentum, and the different parts of that solution were our core loan origination system, which is our monogram loan platform, as well as Captiva, which was used for the acquiring the image in the first place. And it had more responsibility than that. It was actually a way station in the life cycle of the loan, where the document would come in and have to be indexed and cleaned up and leveraging a lot of custom components on top of Captiva. And then eventually, Captiva would export it and Documentum would ingest it. From that point forward, all internal systems were used, leveraging APIs back and forth to Documentum. So that's where we started. The problem we had was it was expensive. So our annual maintenance cost was higher than we wanted. This was several years back, shortly following the consumer credit crisis, which really affected First Marblehead. So cost control was more important than ever. That's always important, but even more important than ever at this point. We were also at a position where we had been attempting an internally driven upgrade of the system for about 8 months, and it was flailing. The team assigned to it was very small, and even with support, we're not succeeding. So there was a lot of time being spent, a lot of energy being spent, opportunity cost really going out the window, right? So at the end of all that, all of a sudden we were faced with a big bill to accommodate the scalability we needed. It was a perfect storm of bad things happening to us. And lastly, we had some functions that just weren't optimized. This was an imaging system that had a grand vision when it started and partially fulfilled it. So we had some just basic functions that we had to smooth over as well. And then lastly, our developer skill set. We needed to take an honest look at what do we need to maintain a Captiva Documentum solution with the customized web top and all these other components that were being sunset and need to be replaced with something. So we had an issue where we had a Java team that was open source evangelists, and we just really had to consider the developer skill set along the way as well. So what do you do? We had a choice. Either upgrade Captiva and Documentum, basically spend another 8 months doing this one, spending the money, acknowledging the developer skill set, hiring more people, essentially, or go another direction, which would simply be replace it. Replace the infrastructure to host these systems, replace the scanning system that acquired the image, and ultimately replace the document repository and change the dozen systems that integrate with this one. This was a pretty easy decision once you put it in those terms, that we chose to go to a new direction. Because actually, I went to a lunch and learn back in summer of 2010. That's what really started this process going. Internal pitch went until about September 2010. Vendor or partner shopping and really kick off with storyboarding in about January of 2011. So when we say 2 years later, it's a little bit more than that from when we really started. So the new solution was comprised of Kofax for our scanning paper documents. And one of the main important pieces of the Kofax selection was that it's not anything but a pass-through. There's no way station here. There's no handling of documents in Kofax. That was very important to us, as we wanted real-time visibility of documents as they're coming in. And what we had before was this pit stop of Captiva, and we really didn't want to persist having to hunt for documents across these different systems. It was important that we got them directly into Alfresco. It was Alfresco version 3 when we started. It was really scaled and as narrow as we could in scope, but anyone who was in the other session heard me say, we weren't blessed with the luxury of controlling scope much. We had to do it all at once. We had a whole imaging system with a loan processing business that needed imaging. So although we limited to one line of business, that's not much of a limit. So we had to stick with our basic workflow, focused on search and retrieval. And then we added in the MSI profiler component, which was really a big shot in the arm for us productivity-wise, because rather than start from scratch and building a user interface that supports loan operations, we were able to leverage several different instances of this profiler as storyboard sort of canned selections and pick off the menu. We like that feature, we like that feature. And it turned our process into one of widening the discussion with the business community, having them pick and then narrowing it back down again. Typically with IT, we're always focused on narrowing things back down. But in this case, the profiler was, I think, a pretty pivotal aspect to our solution, because I think the quote told back to me was, Dave, you don't want library services, you need a business solution. And that really rung true throughout the entire project. So what do we have to do? we have to migrate our documents. There were some sitting inside Captiva. There were some sitting inside Documentum. The Documentum content had a rough metadata model. I mentioned earlier that this was a vast project when it started, so there were lots of aspects, there were lots of loan document types. It was more complex than the business really needed. And it was a result of, in that other initial launch, hiring the wrong consulting team who just wanted to spend money as opposed to solve the business problem. So one of our first exercises here was to really focus on this metadata and have an honest discussion about what do we really need in the new world. And we use the old one as inspiration, make sure we don't forget things, but essentially started from scratch with the redefinition. So our path was within Alfresco. Oh, wait a minute. Just want to make sure this line is not right. Sorry about that. So we completed our Documentum over to Alfresco 3 migration using a combination of things. That first path was defining the metadata with our partner MicroStrategies. We relied on their expertise for this one. This was not our expertise at first Marblehead. We're a loan business. MicroStrategies had demonstrated to us, and really one of the primary reasons for selection, was this expertise of going from Documentum to other things already. They could speak Documentum and could speak Alfresco. It was exactly what we needed. So we ended up working extensively on this modeling, the storyboarding, and the profiler, and we ended up dividing and conquering the labor this way. So the MicroStrategies team was focused on the profile and the business process, and we ended up carving off one of our own internal staff to write a utility to get data from Documentum and put data into Alfresco using the web API. And our approach was basically to do that in batch, large volume, thousands of documents all day long until we were done. But it was a blank instance of ALF3, which we dump and load in. As we were going along with ALF3, we experienced some production problems.
I had a question. So in order to come up with equivalents for each of the pieces you had before, so it was Captiva, Documentum, databases, but for the UI you had WebTop?
Yes.
And then for the Alfresco site, did you have to design a new UX or UI for that?
We leveraged the profiler primarily for that one. So it was a combination of the indexing function is what was happening inside WebTop. So we replaced that one with profiler, mostly. We also spread some of that responsibility onto other internal systems that we already had. And the rationale for that was, number one, the profiler was there as a big shot in the arm productivity-wise, but also to make sure we maintained a separation of duties in the business, that we had one team doing indexing. These are typically high-volume, temporary help that are not terribly critical to the process other than getting the image and assigning it to a loan, lower skill, right? The actual loan ops people, more using the internal systems, they have much more skill to verify and validate the document for processing and whatnot. So that was another one of the motivations for that one-to-one nature of that piece. Sure. So our story, question, yep?
What was the volume of documents you migrated? And did you also migrate ACL?
So what was the volume of documents was the question. We migrated close to 2 million documents, I want to say. I forget the exact number, but it was in that ballpark. For access control, we started over because our old model was just simply not appropriate anymore. So we simply started over. So at this point in the story, we've gone from Documentum to Alfresco. We were feeling very good about it. We were experiencing great performance. We were beginning this bulk migration. Now, of course, our approach is we migrate always. The first set of documents is the active loans, and then we're going to migrate history that are just being retained in archive format. What happened to us is we first launched, business was going fine, performance was great, but our migration at night that was doing thousands of documents started to slow down. And that was a yellow flag that went up for us. We all assumed the migration code must have a bug in it, because how could Alfresco have any issues? But we really started to see slowdowns to a factor of 10. 1 second to 10 seconds is what I mean. This kind of slowdown and delay. And our nightly targets were not even getting close to being hit. So our migration end line was being pushed out in the calendar. Now at first we thought, no big deal. They're archived documents, we're fine. As we started to go forward and production active volume started to increase, we saw heap utilization suffer, and we started to experience slowness for real. This was a big problem for us, and we were faced with a upgrade now type of mindset. And the reason for it is we made a bad decision. We didn't know it at the time, but we put Alfresco 3 into a WebSphere environment on AIX with a 32-bit platform. The Alfresco supported platforms page did include WebSphere, but didn't mean 32-bit in production. So that was a late discovery, and it was too late. So now we're faced with a production system that's not performing adequately. What do you do? Step one is creative architecture, is what I like to call it. We changed the paths into Alfresco. So we had high priority documents that were much more time sensitive. We had low priority documents that just eventually had to be archived. So that was step one of the process. Step two was I called Adam and said, please help me. We need to migrate this thing as quickly as possible. Our peak season is upon us, and we can't tolerate slowness. This is revenue impacting, or could be revenue impacting if it's too slow.
He was more colorful in that call. It's a little more colorful.
Yeah, yeah, you can imagine. So we had to move from 3 to 4. At the same time, we wanted to be on a fully supported platform, because I will give Alfresco support quite a bit of credit. They did not do the typical support experience of, what's your platform? Oh, some aspect of it is not related, is unsupported. We didn't have that experience at all. We had Alfresco support really trying as hard as they could to help us. And although we never really believed we had an operating system issue, we all recognized that being on a platform that isn't one they can replicate was a challenge for us. So we made the decision to migrate from 3 to 4 to achieve the feature benefits and the scalability of 4. We also made the decision to move from WebSphere to JBoss, fully supported platform, and at the same time from AIX to Linux. So a bit to bite off all at once.
Which Linux?
Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I think it's version 6. So this is what we had to bite off. It was a very long, painful process. Our original estimate, I found the SOW this morning on the way here just to prep for it, I think it was 12 days. And we assumed that's 12 working days, calendar time, a month. Maybe. We felt very confident. We had just launched Alf 3. It was splendid. We had solid partners. We're experts in technology. We were very, very wrong. It took us about 9 months, all said and done. As the slide says, the good news is nobody died. We experienced some slowness. We had lots of pizza. We had some yelling. But between Alfresco support and the MSI team and our own internal management support, we were able to juggle priorities enough and allocate enough resources to eventually land this thing before our peak season came back to us.
So from 3 to 4, we did the migration to, there were schema changes. And did you run into that problem?
Yes, we did. I would say we hit most problems that could be hit, one at a time. So our ultimate objective, and we really did try plan A, then B, then C, then D. I think it was about plan J or H that we finally needed to stop the attempt to upgrade in place because it just wasn't working. I made that call personally to install a blank Alfresco 4 instance on the new platform and basically redo our Documentum migration approach by getting the most critical data set, putting it in, and then behind the scenes, ingesting large volumes.
You mentioned the Documentum upgrade as one of the issues.
Yep.
Earlier, did you do that in place as well?
That was an attempt to do that one in place, driven heavily through Documentum support. At that time, we were throwing money at that. It just wasn't working. Yep. So the good news is our upgrade did complete, and our Alfresco 4 bulk migrations have been holding up quite nicely. We did throw some hardware at this problem. So we're running in a 2-node, 2-CPU cluster with about 10 gigs of RAM each. RAM really seems to be the constraining factor. We wanted to oversize it on purpose. We chose a virtualized environment so that we could resize it on the fly. That's certainly a recommendation I would make, and quite happy we did. And although I do agree the upgrade is complete, I will say it's an ongoing tuning exercise as we introduce new lines of business and fine-tune our volume. We're doing about 6,000 or 7,000 documents per hour during a migration period, and we expect that to not continue on an average basis, but that's a big migration. But our peak hour during our summer processing, because we are a student loan business, most of our business is done in August. It's much like being in a retail business. It's just a different cycle. So we need to size it to accommodate our peak hour, which would generally be about 5,000 documents per hour. So we're always going to aim a bit higher than that. Yeah.
How many, is it a cluster environment?
Is it a?
Cluster?
Yes, it is a cluster environment.
How many servers do you have?
We're running Alfresco on two servers, 2 CPU each.
And did you ever have to expand that? Do you have to go to 3?
We have not needed to expand it yet. One of the options we're considering in order to accommodate that is to leverage an active-active configuration with our disaster recovery site. So we do run a shadow 2 servers there. And if we needed to scale up rapidly, we could take on that concept.
So you have, mine is very similar. We have some cluster environment, MySQL on one server by itself, and the indexes are in these early 2 servers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, if one goes down, the other one is there. But if you want to scale and add another one, you went through that.
We have not added another one on the fly in production. I feel pretty confident that we could, based on the experience we've got. One of the things we're currently living with that is on my future horizon to change is we're leveraging Lucene indexing. So each node has their own indexing function. The issue I have with it is that it seems to be resource intensive, and this replication between the nodes has introduced problems over time. So I'm looking to move over to Solr. I talked earlier about our plan A, B, C, D, et cetera. We had originally went into this expecting to use Solr, but the version we're on, Alfresco 4.02, had an issue at the time, or at least we believed it was an issue that we finally decided just to stick with Lucene. But I think the index management is the biggest obstacle we have to just adding another node in a minute. The index rebuild takes about 2 hours, and during that time, that node can't serve traffic. So I think that's really our big challenge to scaling up rapidly within minutes.
Yeah, because we have indexing. We have syncing.
Okay. Excellent. Any other questions on this one?
I have 3%. I don't want to halt the meeting. I would rather ask at the end.
Okay. Okay, sure. I think we'll have plenty of time for questions.
So what kind of storage architecture we have in Documentum, and how do we get that mapped to Alfresco in terms of distributed storage?
So what kind of distributed storage do we have? Do you mean that literally the storage layer?
Yes, the storage layer. Is all the Documentum going to one storage layer?
Yes. Yes, they were. Underneath, I believe we were using an EMC Clarion device for it. That's why I was asking. I'm not much of a hardware guy. The infrastructure team is on the other side of it, but I'm pretty sure that's what our actual storage was. But I can confidently state we did not leverage tiered storage for this solution, although I think that could be something to consider in the future, even with the Alfresco side, is to break off different sites into lower tier storage, really, again, just to manage cost. Okay? So in the future, here we are with our loan processing business happily running on Alfresco 4. It's hit that use case squarely. We have some feature adds that we can even further improve business process with. This last bullet here about automated email integration. So we do have a scenario where borrowers will communicate with customer service via email and attach documents to it. And right now the process is a little clunky. They print them and scan them in, and now their Kofax path is what's used. So we'll add that one just as a small nit of a feature improvement. But a more interesting deal is we've expanded into our payment processing line of business. This is several 100,000 families who make payments for their tuition. And the core part of our payment processing business is to be an intermediary between a student and their school to facilitate transfer of those funds. Now that business has document processing needs as well. So little by little, we're going to creep in and centralize Alfresco as core document repository. Many of the images in that line of business currently aren't even stored. So they're generated, printed, deleted, essentially. But we'd like to improve our records retention capability there. And we've also added outbound email archiving, again, to have this central view of all correspondence back to our customers. I mentioned earlier we've recently completed an acquisition of a student loan processing business that's credit union based. So this is a to-be integrated story. So their business has a separate imaging system. We're going to do a migration eventually, expected to do a migration eventually into Alfresco for this one as well. And then another aspect of our loan business is what we call portfolio management. It seems like there's multiple definitions of that word, but for us what this means is several different things. It could be an existing loan portfolio that somebody has, thousands of loans, and we want to control how they're performing. So we do credit analytics against them to predict how many people are going to pay, as well as deal with those people who stop paying, whether it be a friendly reminder letter all the way up to the collections process. That business process has lots of loan document and records retention needs as well. So that's another area of expansion that we're expecting to put into Alfresco. I think actually that is our last slide. So I think we have plenty of time for questions.
The automated email session, I mean, how far along are you trying to figure out how to capture that automatically?
You know, we've done some analysis on it. I think at this point it's really just a matter of implementing. So very far along.
Custom development?
No, this is leveraging the native capabilities. And we designed the system originally such that any document can be put into a temporary space. And we've got workflow activities that will drop that into its final home. So we can leverage the capability we already built because we had this in mind when we started. So there's no additional custom development. It was all just configuration.
And you're doing that for what, the Exchange layer? If you use Exchange?
It's going to bind to Exchange, yeah. But then once it pulls that document in, it's really in the Alfresco workload. Yeah.
What migration tool did you use for the migration of the documents?
So what migration tool did we use for document migration is we wrote our own. We already had capability API-wise to get to Documentum. We partnered up with MicroStrategy to teach us the API sequence to simulate that in Alfresco. Otherwise, we just had our own, we call it the cleverly named DMC, or Document Management Client.
So I consider the custom client license the document.
We already had that. But yes, there's no shortage of opportunity to pay. Sir.
So when you're migrating models from Documentum into Alfresco, Documentum has like a object types.
Yep.
And how did you end up using types in Alfresco? Did you end up going through aspect route, or did you end up creating more types instead of aspects?
We do leverage aspects. And Adam, you might be able to color in some of the rationale for that better than I can.
Yeah, so we did use content types, we did use aspects, but they also, how do we say it, mellowed the model they had in Documentum. So the Documentum model, they used doc types, they had subtypes, they had all the exciting performance things that associate when you start going down that road. And as Dave said, I guess it was another presentation, that's true. And David said when they did this route, when they did this route, everything got a lot more, relaxed, if you will. It was the focus on just the loan processing documents, the content type and aspect needs weren't going to be as exciting as how it was in Documentum. Because they did narrow the focus. So I wouldn't say it's a one-on-one document type to content type or document type to content type and aspect. It was, we shrunk a lot of those things just because they really didn't need it.
So you went towards like more aspect driven?
More aspect driven. Yeah.
Very much so. And one of the drivers beyond what Adam just described there was this notion of flexibility, right? Is what I like to call the cost of being wrong and minimizing that. So when we first launched, because we did spend a fair amount of time up front doing analysis of these documents, but we were pretty comfortable that no matter how much analysis we did, before we were done, we were going to redo some of it. And that's not because we did a poor job. It's just because the iterative nature of defining the requirements necessitated that style. So aspects are something that were very easy for us to add, remove, be flexible with. And essentially, the cost of being wrong to add a new document type or aspect made it very easy to deal with.
We also used aspects to handle some of the workflow pieces too. So as everybody knows, an aspect can have metadata. We actually use the aspects as a way of knowing where a document is or what a document is doing. So that was the
Right.
extra thing. Obviously, with Documentum, a document type is metadata, a subtype is da-da-da-da. The aspects not only give us the metadata piece, but they give us the ability to do other things with it as well, as far as defining where the document was in the process. Because their workflow wasn't a million steps,
Right.
but it was shuffled in a number of places. So
Right.
the aspect, so it was more aspect driven than content type driven, and we used aspects for more than just metadata.
Couple of questions. I think you were patient.
Yeah, so you mentioned that y'all went to Alfresco partially because you're a Java shop and open source-ish. What were y'all using to customize Documentum?
We did have Java as well in that one, but the web top layer was somewhat unusual for that. So, at the end of the day, they'll probably make an argument that it was Java also, but I guess there's multiple flavors. And it wasn't done in such a way that it was easily maintainable. Question over here?
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your experience designing the UI in Alfresco? I know you mentioned the MSI profiler piece that you guys used, but
Yeah.
a little bit about that decision and kind of how that process was in terms of moving folks from WebTop to the Alfresco
Sure.
site.
Yeah. As far as designing a UI in Alfresco, we recognized pretty early that we didn't know what we were doing on that one. And so when MicroStrategies brought forward the profiler and its UI and all of its different capabilities, it was very obvious to us that that was the right place to start. There wasn't a lot of love for WebTop in the business community, either functionally or stability. So within IT, it seemed to have issues as well. So as far as our UI design goes, the way we handled that one was that sort of wide presentation of various storyboards and what components were on what page and what workflow happened. And we conducted a series of interviews with our loan operations team to figure out which ones matched and then customize the profiler. MSI really handled that development for us entirely. So from my perspective, it was actually the easiest part. And frankly, though, joking aside, it was the smoothest part because we had done that investment up front. The business community had the chance to say what they wanted, and of course, no, that's not what I wanted after it was delivered, and we tweaked it. But it really was very smooth for us. I'd say out of all the aspects that we had to deal with, that one was the least painful.
And in terms of total cost of ownership before and after, sorry, in terms of the total cost of ownership for Documentum versus Alfresco, so you have a dev team before and after. You don't have the licenses, but I just wanted to get a feel for what was the difference.
Sure. No, so the total cost of ownership, I need to shy away from specific numbers based on our legal obligations, but let me quantify it a little bit. So licensing-wise, it was half. Development team-wise, about the same. And server-wise, I think it was 5 to 1 from the different Documentum topology shrinking down. So the server side of it was somewhat difficult to quantify because we did also move into a heavily virtualized environment. So where a VM occupies a portion of that. But it was a pretty tangible cost savings across the board. Even when I factor in the fact that we did partner up with MicroStrategies and we had to take that time, there's two aspects of that even, because there was the initial cost of the implementation, plus just ongoing support and feature enhancements. It's dwindled way down because we're in prod, it's quite stable now. But there's a small ongoing re-engagement. But it's to the point where when we do want to take on another line of business, we feel pretty well equipped to deal with it. And when we're not, the re-engagement is much smaller now because it's very focused. So I'm very pleased with our resulting cost of ownership on the system.
Have you ever had to apply any patches, Java patches to the server due to release of any hacker toolkits and things like that?
We do patch the systems quarterly to keep up with regulatory needs, but I have not, I can't believe I'm going to say this, experienced any problems as a result of Java patching. One note there too is one of the decisions we made to keep security frontmost in our conversation is to basically hide Alfresco. There's no public-facing component of Alfresco in our solution. Our consumer web app is our trusted layer, heavily defended. It leverages an internal connection on the internal network segment back to Alfresco, which certainly causes it to be a little bit easier to deal with from that perspective. We don't pen test Alfresco, for example. Right. Any other questions? Okay, yep, one in the back.
What do you think you're going to do differently next time you upgrade to 5?
What will we do differently? I will allocate more time. You know, that's a really tough question to answer, honestly, because we certainly would never have predicted the trouble from 3 to 4. The issues we faced consistently are what I would consider to be one-off issues, not systemic of bad policy or bad approach. They were technical in nature. So I guess I would be a little bit more entrepreneurial about it and fail faster. So if I was attempting an upgrade in place, I probably wouldn't get to plan J before I switch gears. I would probably do that now on C or D. That was probably my biggest lesson learned, is to stop continuing to fight issue after issue after issue and start and revisit an approach that I knew would be successful, even if it took longer. Sir?
How much of A through J was Alfresco and how much was operating system and application server?
I'd say the vast majority of it was Alfresco. Our motivation to do the upgrade was the container, WebSphere, being 32-bit. Simply stated, the indexing resource needs vastly exceeded the amount of resource we could apply. So as a result, the CPU and memory would be pegged, yet the system would not serve any traffic. So that one I have to blame on our installation. But when we moved over to Linux and we're doing this upgrade in place, the issues really were 3 to 4 in nature. I can't recall a single instance of AIX behaved one way and Linux behaved a better way, except maybe one misconfiguration of ulimits. Yes?
Do you foresee any need for Alfresco cloud capabilities, and do you use any other sort of file sync and share?
What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
So do you see a need for Alfresco cloud capabilities, or do you already use some other file sync and share solution?
We don't use another file sync and share solution as a standard within the enterprise architecture. I could see a usage of Alfresco cloud in our future. Essentially, our financial services function causes us to be very conservative security-wise. So we host Alfresco internally. We run 2 data centers. You know, if I look forward into the industry, I don't really think we're going to run data centers for the rest of our lives. I think we're going to be pursuing cloud adoption at each leg of the journey. And I do think Alfresco in the cloud is a good use case for us to consider if we can get the security aspects of it nailed down. It would also allow us to expand into some other areas, such as other lines of business that are also already cloud-based, being able to integrate more easily. And one of our additional future use cases here is to be a SharePoint killer. So we have SharePoint internally for collaboration, project teams, department teams, and whatnot. I absolutely expect Alfresco to enter that space instead for us. And I think at that time, the cloud connectivity and you know, just the cloud nature of it, I guess, would be a big benefit for us. You know, to be honest, our current installation of our internal loan processing system wouldn't benefit much other than simply not having the servers.
So have you done any SharePoint to Alfresco migration yet?
We have not. See you next year. Correct, we do not.
There was an official.
And the licensing cost, you mentioned twice as much for Documentum.
That's right.
Now, I understand Alfresco is subscription and Documentum, is that the upgrade thing?
It was maintenance.
Oh, maintenance. cost with Alfresco. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, it was a scary spreadsheet.
How many users do you have on the documentum?
How many users is a tough question to answer because internal users access the system through internal systems. That's probably 50 to 100 at any point in time doing operations and customer service. However, our nightly process that generates documents and inserts them into Alfresco is going to cause a lot more simulated user traffic. In addition to that, we've got our online user community through our consumer portal, but it's going to get documents to serve online. So an internal document, instead of mailing it to you, we'll deliver it online or allow you to upload that way. So that's going to fluctuate dramatically through the year. In peak season, it can be upwards of hundreds simultaneous. In a lower season, obviously a lot less. Yeah. 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. Any other questions or areas I didn't cover? Yeah, sir.
So did you notice any performance bottlenecks in terms of any functionality, like number of folders in a folder, number of documents in a folder? Is there any noticeable performance?
Well, so let me talk about that, I guess. Number of documents per folder, I have not experienced any problem there, but I think we were pretty smart about the initial design up front. I think MicroStrategies had lived this pain previously, and we were able to benefit from that experience. So our taxonomy is structured according to time. So the topmost folder is going to be a year, then a month, then a day, then an hour. I don't think it goes down to a minute. I can't remember exactly. But the bottom line is our single lone folder is going to be dropped into one of those subfolders. And because just time is bound, the maximum number of folders, child folders, leaf folders, I could say, is quite limited. So the number of documents in that folder are going to be driven by peak hour. So we haven't really had any concern over our peak hour exceeding max documents per folder. Does that make sense? Okay.
Do you archive anything?
No. Right now, our active loan site is the active loan site, and we certainly talked about archiving some things into an offline storage, but we have not done it yet.
Because we ran into this problem with the depth of the folder you can see the searches can be significantly slower over time. And so we have devised the archiving mechanism in your case. It might not be possible, but for our case it was.
Sure. No, and I think it's on the horizon. It hasn't been a problem yet. It just hasn't risen to priority. The date-driven taxonomy has worked fine for us so far. And performance is adequate. Internal use, it feels instant. People don't notice any form of delay at all. Anyone else?
Can you clarify what MSI profiler is exactly?
Sure. Well, it's a different application. And Adam can certainly color it in more, but it's a custom application that is Java-based and drives the Alfresco API. I'm sure his sales pitch is better than that.
No, he did it, not me. So basically, and there's one tiny little screen, because we were trying not to, quite frankly, sell anything, just tell you about what the solution was. Basically, what the MSI profiler is conception at a high level, the same thing everybody else sees, image on the right, metadata on the left, okay? But what happens is these are all configurable panels, okay? So it could be metadata, it could be lookups into other systems, like a loan processing system. Also, you can have workflow in a tablet as well. So it gave them one interface to do metadata things, to look up pieces, to check other data, to kick off a workflow, to run a process, all by staring at the document. So in this exact example, they're looking up a loan, and that's the coming out of their monogram system. So what the profiler did is gave them a place to look at the document, change metadata, kick off workflow, do a search, and all that other stuff.
Okay. I just saw, we just saw the presentation on Workspace, but so is this specific to Marblehead in terms of an application that they've created?
No, this is in the MicroStrategies. Us build, resell, and like that. It's on top. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. That's the idea. The configurable panels based on the different functions.
Okay.
And like he said, that was nice for the different business groups because they were able to say what they wanted the panels to do. So that was the idea.
So there's in the back end, there is a workflow, and then you show your black workflow on the next side.
Right, right. The next tasks pick. So it's either going to be business rule driven where it goes next, or they can pick. So it depends on the business area. And it could be based on the metadata, or it could be based, again, on user selection. And you can, from here, you can, little icon there, you can email the document out. So right from the screen, if you need to email to outside concern, you hit a button, send an email out. Another button sends a notification out. Another button allows you to what you call it, download the document to edit. So, you know, the idea was give one interface to do all that. So, which made it easier.
So this is being used instead of share. Are you using share or both, the combination of this profiler as well as the share app?
Our primary business function is going to be focused on this one. Generally speaking, we tried to insulate the community from needing to know much about Alfresco and instead focus on their business process. We do have super users that will dive back directly into share and do searches or move a document if they recognize it was completely misindexed. I mean, it's not common that we have to go directly in. Sometimes the development team will, just for research, a production help desk ticket kind of a situation. But for the most part, we try and provide a purpose-driven UI for the community.
So in this profiler, you're not using any collaboration kind of things?
Yeah, this is more of a processing piece. Yeah, it's more of a processing. People have used it in a workflow at the end of a search and like that, but it's really for the processing piece.
Okay, well, on that front, then I guess the summary from my perspective is this was much more exciting of a migration than I ever would have expected, but we did come out of it successful.
No, we died.
I will re-emphasize the Alfresco support stuck with us through this. And everyone has sort of different love-hate relationships with their support vendors. But I will give them a lot of credit on this one, that the model of having continuous people, being able to stick to the ticket, it's not pass the ticket all the time. And likewise the MSI team, we were able to pull this together. Quite a bit of heroics on the first Marblehead side as well. But it's a good news story in the end. And our current situation feels good and pretty well poised for the future. So thank you for your time.